All right. Welcome, everyone. Folks are still coming in, so we won't quite get started, but I did want to mention to anybody who doesn't want your image on the internet, we are live streaming this event over Facebook and YouTube. You'll also be able to rewatch on those channels down the road. And it is 7, so let's get started. I'm Will Hopkins from New Hampshire Peace Action. And this is our every other Monday discussion series that we've been doing since I think we had our first in April. We're super excited today to have Ronelle and Martin here to tell us a little bit about New Hampshire's role in the larger Black Lives Matter movement and about what it's been like organizing in that movement in New Hampshire. You should make sure to tune in with us every other Monday. For folks just coming in, make sure that you're muting yourself as you come in to avoid background noise. And let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start out by introducing Ronelle Tshiela, who this is the first time I've met Ronelle. She's a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Manchester. She's a senior at UNH studying political science, and she's publicly serving on the public board appointed by the state to oversee community law enforcement reactions called the LEACT Commission. So I'm going to open Ronelle by saying thank you so much for being with us tonight. And would you be willing to tell us a little bit about who you are, what your role in New Hampshire's Black Lives Matter movement is, and how, why, and when did you get involved?
First of all, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Ronelle Tshiela. I feel so weird saying that because I feel like people have seen my face way too many times over the past few months. But so I started with a few friends, Black Lives Matter Manchester, when I was in high school. So I had just turned 17. And we decided to kind of reignite that in light of recent events and the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And so the past few months have just been filled with a lot of organizing, like protests and events, and talking to elected officials and members of our community, and just talking about what we want to see here in New Hampshire. And as Will said, I was appointed by Governor Sununu to serve on the Commission on Law Enforcement, Accountability, Community, and Transparency. And that is a commission where we're really looking at community relations, police misconduct, and police training. And we're talking about the kinds of things that we want to see change here in New Hampshire. And so that's been a really great opportunity. I feel like there was another part to your question that I might have forgotten about.
Yeah, what's more about your role in New Hampshire's Black Lives Matter movement, and then how and why? I mean, just personally, yeah. What moved you to become a leader in New Hampshire's BLM community and movement?
Yeah, so Black Lives Matter Manchester is really just like 4 of us, and Nashville also has like 4 people as well. So it's really this small group of individuals, and we're all in our early 20s. I don't think any of us are older than like 23, and I just turned 21 in June. And so we kind of just do whatever it takes to get people to listen to us and try to really get the change that we want to see, because at the end of the day, we believe that young people and the youth are really the voice of this movement and the voice of the kinds of progression that we want to see, not only here in New Hampshire, but, countrywide and nationwide. That was a weird way to put that. But so my family moved here from Atlanta when I was in around 5th grade. And like immediately I experienced culture shock, and I really started experiencing racism in forms of microaggressions, but also like blatantly racist acts. I remember I was in 5th grade when a girl came up to me in the park, and she told me that her dad said that they couldn't play with us because me and my sister were Black. And she actually used the N-word, like hard ER, and it was like devastating to me. And when I was in high school, more things like this, people just telling me that Black people deserve discrimination because like 90% of us were criminals and on welfare, and just like all these things that I remember people saying directly to me as a student in the Manchester School District, and then growing up and seeing more blatant racism, like hearing from my brothers and my friends and hearing about their experiences with law enforcement. And I have a friend who's actually in Black Lives Matter Manchester, and he doesn't drive with anything in his pockets. And he places everything on the dashboard because when he stopped, he doesn't want to appear that he's reaching for a weapon or anything like that, regardless of if the officer tells him to get his license or his registration or anything like that. So it's all the experiences that I've had with racism, along with the kinds of things that I've heard in my community, that makes me really want to engage in this movement. And so, yeah, there's something that we're launching pretty soon called the New Hampshire's Not Innocent campaign, we're calling it. And it's basically trying to help explain to people that, you know, we're not exempt from the types of things that happen across the nation. We might not talk about it that much, but when Black people only make up 1% of the New Hampshire population, there are just a lot of stories that are there, but they're being untold. And so that's what we're trying to kind of do here in New Hampshire when it comes to Black Lives Matter.
Thank you so much, Ronelle. That's there are definitely some things I want to go back to and touch on. In particular, I think I've lived in New Hampshire my whole life, and we in New England like to think of ourselves as above racism, and that particular part of your experience is something that I've heard echoed a number of times and want to come back to in a bit. But first, I want to introduce Martin. So I've known Martin for a few years, and I'm glad to have you on. Thank you for being here, Martin. So Martin is he's been organizing with the American Friends Service Committee out of Concord, a group called Change for Concord, and also as their intern for a good spell. He's a co-founder of Change for Concord, and the author of the book America Calls to Me: The Story of a Refugee Boy's Journey. And he calls himself an aspiring musician. I would call Martin an extremely talented musician. So Martin, come on down and tell us who you are, why you do this work, how you got started, and what your experience has been over the last couple months.
So thank you, Will, for having me. I would definitely say with my story, started off perhaps when I came here as a new immigrant, and back in 2003, where I started school at Theme School, which is now the community center on the Heights in Concord. I would say first day of school, I definitely I think kids there definitely made it known that I wasn't really welcomed on the playground and in the classroom setting. So from then, I would definitely say I struggled in school. After second grade, going to broken ground, kids picked on me because I didn't speak English the way they wanted to hear it. Over time, growing up in Concord and being surrounded by this culture, you literally have to pick up how to speak like the people that you live around. But it didn't really stop there as far as discrimination wise. I definitely would say, like, in middle school, being a sports junkie, a lot of I would hear stories from my coach saying that people within who were adults were saying that you would probably end up in jail or get some white girl pregnant. That was the narrative that was already spoken about my life, and I didn't really know who these people were. So as far as experiencing racism, like in Concord, where I basically grew up, it's been like an ongoing thing, and it's been like a hard thing to be able to share with your friends, because there's always this in crowd and out crowd type of thing. So I guess like from that background, you kind of understand a little bit of like where that passion pours in from, like when I got connected with Black Lives Matter. I like you had mentioned, I started with Change for Concord back in 2016, and basically we were looking at like we came together because IE, who was one of the former intern, had mentioned and talked about the disparities of people of color that would graduate from Concord High School, and really it was like the system was just kind of just like peddling them out, and then whatever happens to you basically happens to you. People who had like crazy potential would end up being kind of like their potential would be wasted within the community, because there wasn't that outlet for them to be able to reach to the next place that they wanted to go. And we realized that this was really because it was more of a system that was set up for them to fill, instead of resources being provided for them to be able to succeed and become like what they potentially were able to be within the community. So when with like I remember like I remember the case with Trayvon Martin actually, and like really watching and paying attention and hoping like justice would be served, because it just like really hurt me, like because I saw myself. His name's Trayvon Martin. My name's Martin. So I really, I was like, hey, there's not much of a difference between him, like, because I wear my hoodie at in school, and I seen him, I saw a reflection of me, and it was really tough when I saw that Zimmerman getting away with murder, and then even years later, like selling the weapon that he used to kill Trayvon. It's just like as unbelievable that that America just like would let injustice like that happen. And then when for me, like when Aubrey was murdered while he was jogging, I think that really hit home for me, because I try to reach out to people who were very close, like people who I thought I could trust, like my white pastors, and it was like crickets were like coming out of nowhere. I was really hearing nothing from them. Having people just kind of leave you on read, like because they don't want to deal with what you're bringing forth. That was like when Omar Arbery murder happened. I honestly was like, I hope this doesn't happen again, and I hope like the people who call themselves allies and faith leaders in the community, like that, if this happens again, if they don't speak up, I think I'm gonna lose my cool. And not even long after that, like the video surfaced of George Floyd being, basically suffocating under the knee of an officer who was supposed to be the one protecting. And I think for me, like that's when I kind of was like, yo, at this point, like no one's gonna really speak up or do anything until like I get out of my comfort zone and do something about it. And I was actually I attended one of the rallies that Ronelle and the Black Lives Matter group from Manchester put on, and I was very inspired to see that people coming out, people of different colored background, really saying we're tired and sick of like injustice happening within America and then within our own backyards as well. That propelled me to like really take initiative when the high schoolers had brought the idea for also wanting to do a rally in Concord.
Thank you, Martin. I want to circle back. I'm going to come back to talking a little bit about how organizing in New Hampshire has been going and what the goals are aside from the rallies. But I did want to, before we start talking about some of that stuff, Ronelle, would you be willing to talk about your move from Atlanta to New Hampshire? I mean, we think of ourselves as a enlightened liberal New England, and Georgia is deep South Confederacy. And can you talk about how you experienced racism in Georgia versus racism in New Hampshire?
It's interesting that you say that, because when I lived in Georgia, I lived in a school that was super mixed, but a lot of the times I was sitting in classrooms where there was maybe only one white kid, as to where here in New Hampshire, I would be sitting in a classroom and I was the only Black person. And so I was thinking about this earlier this week, but I remember distinctly there was a time in my third grade class when somebody came in looking for this boy. He went by the name of Bailey, still remember. And they asked like where he was in the classroom, and somebody, a Black boy, said, "He's the white kid sitting in the corner." And the rest of us jumped down his neck. And for third graders, that comment was absolutely ridiculous, and we were not going to take it. We were saying, that is racist, that is horrible, like how could you say that? And we just could not take that. And so I moved to New Hampshire, and I'm the only Black person sitting in a classroom. And comments were made, like the one I talked about earlier, that Black people deserve discrimination because 90% of us stole and we were criminals and we were on welfare. And I remember sitting in this classroom and nobody came to my aid the way we did for Bailey that day in my third grade class. And I just think about that all the time. And I think about the fact that we are just so failing in the areas of teaching Black culture and Black history and the issues and the struggles that Black people face. And I always connect it's weird because it was a situation that happened when I was like a little kid in elementary school, but I always connected my experiences in high school with that situation, because and it's been in other ways too, in my community, at work, and just things that happen, and nobody had really defended me. And I was just like, I felt really alone a lot of the times, like whether it was ridiculing me for being darker, or ridiculing me for like having different textured hair, or maybe having braids in my hair or different hairstyles, and people treating me like I was kind of a zoo animal instead of a person because I look different than them. It was really difficult. And so I remember, like, Martin talked about earlier about Trayvon Martin. I remember that too. I remember being so mad when that happened. And then sitting in classrooms and teachers wanted to put it up for debate whether or not this teenager deserved to die, and just being so devastated. And the same thing happened when Michael Brown was killed. And that situation made me just as angry, but even more than it did when Trayvon Martin was murdered as well. And that was really what a lot of people say, like, what radicalized you, I guess, for lack of a better term. And for me, it was the murder of Michael Brown. And so just sitting in classrooms and hearing things in my community and from my neighbors, and discussion on whether or not these men deserved, not even men, but boys, Michael Brown, the anniversary of his murder was just, I believe, last week or the week before. He was 18 years old. He didn't get to go to college. He had just graduated high school, discussing whether or not these boys deserve to die. And I know that was not a conversation that, obviously I never made it to the high school level in Georgia, but in my primarily Black schools, I can never imagine a conversation like that happening. So it was a really rough transition for a while. Like, I begged and begged and begged my parents to move back to Georgia. But I'm kind of happy to be here now because I get to be the change that I want to see. So.
That's great. What has it been like, and this is for both of you, what has it been like organizing in New Hampshire, in particular, in this most recent, and I think police not being held accountable for extremely high and disproportionate levels of violence against communities of color has been an epidemic in this country for a very, very long time. But this most recent round of responses, how has it been organizing with Corona in the works, and also the reality that you're organizing in New Hampshire, which has got to be very different than organizing in a place like New York City or anywhere where there's a less homogenous white community.
Martin, do you want to take that one first, or you want me to?
Yeah, I can go ahead and tackle it first. I definitely say during the coronavirus, it's sad that that we have to fight two pandemic or epidemic at the same time. It's not only are we worried about our lives being taken away, or losing our loved ones and even ourselves to a virus, but at the same time, like, we have another thing to watch out for, which is the people who are in power, who are sworn and supposed to be there to protect us, and, picking us out, basically. And so it's like at that stage, it's like you have to kind of pick, like, which one is more risky for you? Are you going to fight to survive, to make your voice heard, and hopefully bring about change by shifting, whether political or even the consciousness of the people who live within the circumference or within the nation and globally, or are you just going to continue to let things happen? So I would say locally, within the scope of Change for Concord, and then along with Black Lives Matter, like, some of the things that we've been doing is shifting focus towards, like, getting how do we engage the community in dialogue. With Change for Concord, one of the things that we also did with that is we had a cultural dialogue, because we know that people tend to be afraid of things that they don't know about. You might have come across someone wearing a cultural, gown, or maybe wearing what do you call those head wrap, or you've seen that within the Dick Cheney movie, and you think that person is a terrorist. How do you break down those preconception that people have about other people? So the cultural dialogue, it was one of the means that we went about it, and another means was also, we thought that within the settings and places where the within speaking of Concord, where it's most diverse, talking about the Heights, at Keach Park particularly, we know that people come out there to have soccer games, because after a long day of work, that's something that they do. So we go to those areas, target those areas particularly, and we have events within the framework of the things that the people are already doing, such as around a game of soccer, where we would have people also have booths and other activities where they would reach out to their elected officials to let people know that their elected officials aren't, like, so far away that you literally can't get in touch with them, like they're just a call away. So we try to demystify that you can hold these people who are making laws that are affecting your life accountable. So Ronelle, if you want to jump on.
You're still muted, Ronelle.
My laptop gave me a notification saying I was muted, and I'm like, okay, that's embarrassing. But so organizing in New Hampshire has been it's been a challenge, definitely, because a lot of people here, like I said earlier, think that New Hampshire is just exempt from all these things that happen across the country, and we're so progressive, and that just, couldn't happen here. And so it's been, like, kind of difficult, like me and my friends and, like, people like Martin, we didn't expect that a bunch of the actions that we were organizing and a lot of the things that we're doing were going to turn into this huge thing that would span over a few months. And then our summer would be turned into something that we never imagined it before. And like Martin was saying earlier, in wake of, you know, a pandemic, it's really interesting because you have to think, are you going to, you know, stay inside, or are you going to try to make your voice heard because this issue matters so much to you? Because in either situation, it's really life or death. And the coronavirus, the pandemic, disproportionately affects people of color and Black people specifically. And so it's really something that you do have to sit there and think about, like, is this going to be worth it? And a lot of us thought yes, you know. And so we'd go to these events, and fortunately a lot of people showed up for us. A lot of people would be there, a lot of people cared. And so it was really overwhelming, but also heartwarming and encouraging to see how many people came and showed up for us. At the same time, we've definitely dealt with a lot of opposition from our elected officials, members of our community. You know, I get called a terrorist and a Marxist on a daily basis. You know, a lot of people don't really understand that we're not only marching and protesting and really speaking up in solidarity with other states, but we're also doing this because we're facing problems here in New Hampshire. So it's been really challenging, but it's also been super rewarding. You know, I think a lot of people are learning, a lot of people are waking up, and that's really important to me. I talked about earlier some experiences that I had with people in schools when I was younger. And it's interesting because a few of those people have actually come to me and said, you know, like, I'm sorry for the way I treated you back then. I'm sorry for the things I said and the way I acted. I didn't know back then, but now I know. And I'm so happy to see that you are taking charge and you are taking control and you're really mobilizing here in New Hampshire, because we need that. And that's one of the most rewarding things about this. So it's definitely been difficult, but also it needs to happen, and who's going to do it? So
Yeah, thank you. We do need that. Can you, and this again is to either of you, can you tell us a little bit about what you're having calls to reps about specifically? Is there legislation you're working on? Do you have goals that you see other organizations? I know there are a lot of members of a lot of organizations on the call today, and a lot of people who want to do work to help support this movement moving forward. Do you know what direction you're leading things as far as what we're working on for our next steps to make the problem better in New Hampshire?
I can go first so that I can, you know, because I'm going to try to be brief, because I feel like I always like go on and on when I start talking about this. But, you know, obviously there are things in terms of accountability, and a bill was signed into law not too long ago that made it mandatory for police officers to report misconduct and things like that. And the thing about that bill was, you know, a lot of people were surprised, first of all, the governors who signed it, but also that, you know, something like this was happening here in New Hampshire. But I think we need to also remember, and it's important for people to know, that Black Lives Matter, like, honestly, like, we understand that this bill kind of wasn't even really supposed to be voted on, and there was like talks about how there wasn't enough time for it to reach the Senate and things like that. But because of, in wake of what happened in May, it actually did make vote and it was signed into law. However, this duty to report misconduct didn't come with a penalty for officers who do not report misconduct. And it's actually already a policy at a lot of law enforcement agencies to report misconduct. There is a duty to report. So we're definitely going to be, you know, pushing for more accountability when it comes to things like that. Like I said earlier, I'm serving on the commission. I think that's something that I brought up, and along with a couple others the other day, is like, you know, how can we make sure that not only are police officers required to report misconduct, but that something happened, because, you know, they're just giving kind of a slap on the wrist, and that's just not enough. We definitely want things to happen at the school level. Like I said earlier, a lot of, I believe that New Hampshire has kind of failed in the area of Black history and teaching people about our culture and the issues that we face and things like that. And I think that a lot of the issues are rooted in there, because that's where ignorance is bred. It's bred through people not knowing and people not being properly educated on things like that. Oh geez, there was something I was gonna say like right after that, but I kind of forgot. So that happens a lot.
Let's let Martin
yeah, I'll try to remember.
do a little bit, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I think Ronelle did a wonderful job of like just recounting a lot of the things that we're working on. I definitely would say even locally is the school, within the school system, particularly with just showing very clearly now with the coronavirus that um, there's a huge gap between like where uh, you know minorities, people of color that and people with mental health and disability, that there is not a lot of focus put and resources put towards the education system towards them, um, and you know they're really the ones taking the beating, and even with the housing crisis, I know there's been a lot of research that's been coming up that's showing that people who are in who low income housing are actually more at risk because the banks are more likely to foreclose on those on those houses. So so there is a lot as far as like um, conversations around like why it's very important to the school systems to uh, consider removing the school resource officers and perhaps replacing that individual or person with a psychologist that may be more or someone that specializes in mental health and actually helping the kids instead of calling someone to be of someone that that represents punishment and in that sorts in that area. I think a lot of also been talking about like locally about diversifying staff and in that area as well as talking about Ronelle talked about the curriculum and really representing Black history and telling the full scope of like history without whitewashing it. I think those are some of the things that we're talking about and things that and there's a lot that we're doing in as far as taking steps to make that happen. One of the beautiful things that I'm enjoying seeing is how the Black Lives Movement within New Hampshire has inspired alumni to really grab this by the bull and just move forward with demanding changes within the school and within the society from within the scope of society and their community as well. So yeah, that's some of the things that I think I wanted to add on there. I don't know, Ronelle, if you remember.
Yeah. So just to add, I'm sure there's more, but I think there are two that I kind of want to point out. So the commission, the LEAC commission has talked a lot about implicit bias training and kind of, how we can expand that because there's really not enough here in New Hampshire. And when it comes to law enforcement, there's really no in-house expertise on these issues. So there's really no sufficient way to make sure that they're effectively being trained on the areas of implicit bias. And so actually, I believe it was either last week or the week before last week, whichever week was the 6th and the 7th. And so I actually attended a course on fair and impartial policing. It was a 13-hour course, and a lot of the police chiefs in New Hampshire were invited to attend along with some others. And there was like 5 people who weren't members of law enforcement in that room. And I was the youngest person, of course, and one of only 2 women. And so there was like 30 people there. And so, there really needs to be an expansion on implicit bias training, but I think it needs to go further. And I think people that are really anybody who's dealing with the public in regard to like any of our elected officials and people who work in our city councils and people who work in our school systems, all these people need to be given training like that and really need to be focusing on not only recognizing their own bias, but talking about how we can overcome it. So that's one thing. I think it was really, the course was super, I think a lot of the chiefs were receiving the information well. However, there was a lot where I had to wonder whether or not they were really grasping the the concepts or kind of wondering whether or not they would implement it in their day-to-day practice. But anyways, the second thing, and this is another thing that I've been talking about on the commission along with others like from members of the ACLU, but is data collection. I think that, data needs to be collected at every stop, for every person that's detained, for every person that's arrested, because it's super important. And not only does it need to be collected, but it needs to be available for public record. And I think that's something that will really hopefully increase transparency. And, a lot of the law enforcement agencies here in New Hampshire have been saying we're doing a great job. There's no systemic racism here in New Hampshire, and just like this, oh, we're innocent type of mentality. And so, if they feel that way, I think that they should be very transparent when it comes to data. They should be willing to not only collect this data, but make it available and make it public record. But of course, there's been a lot of opposition to that, and they don't want to. And I wholeheartedly believe that it's because they're afraid of what that data might reveal, and it's going to reveal disparities. A while ago, we found out that in New Hampshire, pre-decriminalization of marijuana, Black people in New Hampshire were 4.1 times more likely to be arrested for nonviolent drug-related offenses. And that is just at the state level. I'm pretty sure when you look at individual counties, it's like in some places it's way higher, and it's absolutely insane. And so, yeah, those are just some of the things that we're trying to do here in New Hampshire. There's like a lot more, but yeah, I think those are like some of the really big things that I want people to keep in mind.
That's great. Thank you both for all that. There's a lot there to chew up, and I wish we had time to really delve into everything you've talked about, but there's a lot of ground to cover. So I'd love to ask, how do you see New Hampshire's role on the national and global stage, and how do you fit into the larger national Black Lives Matter umbrella, and what can we do in New Hampshire to help move the agenda at the national level as well as at the state?
So for me, I would definitely say, keep calling your elected officials and like their offices, whether it's like at the state level or the national level, because obviously a lot of things need to be dealt with at the national level, but there's a lot of things that need to be talked about at the state level as well. For example, qualified immunity, that's a federal doctrine, and that's something that needs to be handled at the federal level. And that's something that we actually were able to talk about with Senators Hassan and Shaheen. So New Hampshire is kind of, I would say that in a lot of ways we do fit under the national agenda, but at the same time, I think that obviously like there are different states and there are different communities, and there are things that we need to individualize to what we're doing here. And so, for example, when there's a conversation about defunding the police, or to put it more simply, because people like get so afraid when they hear that, but reinvesting in our communities and really looking at, where we are failing and where we can reimagine like how we are as communities, and really reinvesting in things like healthcare and schools and mental health, and just all these things that really can help us move forward as a society, because there's way too much there's way too many things that we expect the police to deal with, and that's a problem, because that's over policing, and just a whole lot of things end up a whole lot of problems are bred from that, unfortunately. And so so here in New Hampshire, we're definitely asking people to, because I'm from Manchester, I know Martin's from Concord, and a lot of people that I work with are from Nashua. And so these are the three biggest cities in New Hampshire. And so things might be different. And obviously like our town's budgets aren't the same. And like how our towns decide to allocate dollars don't like work the same way. And so we really think that everyone needs to put pressure on their elected officials in their individual towns, find out how money is being spent, find out how they can reinvest in their communities, but also remember to keep an eye on things that are happening at the national level as well.
Thank you. Martin, you got anything to add there?
I think she said everything. I definitely would say like is like also the importance of just rewriting the narrative of what a lot of people think is true and not true about the movement and Black Lives Matter. I think Ronelle already mentioned it, is that is like defunding hate. Like defunding hate and then investing in love, investing in the community, investing in the better community, in improving the community and our and which will ultimately, as things come together, the whole nation. Um, so I really think a lot of money that's going into programs and the pockets of people who don't have the aren't what's the word, they're not engaged, or they're detached from the communities that we're living in, and they don't know exactly the things that people who live in the communities are going through, should really be defunded. Uh, and as far as like, with policing, if you don't live within the community that you're policing, and you just come in there, that's another conversation that we should be talking about, is what are the people within the community saying, and where do they want that money to go?
Thank you so much, Martin. So I would like to open it up to folks who are attending. There are about 60 of us on right now. So I think putting something in the chat is a great way to get a question across. Let us know if you want to direct it, and if you would prefer to say to speak a question out loud, feel free to raise your hand either using the hand raising feature on Zoom or just in your camera, and we'll try to scroll through all the faces and keep an eye on who's got a hand up. And I'll remind you that someone's got to go first, but once someone goes first, the discussion usually gets moving pretty quickly. So go ahead. Oh, we've got our first question from Marcia Garber, and it's, did the LEACT Commission deadline get extended? Ronelle, if you know what that means, please explain it to the rest of us, because I don't know what the deadline is. Or
Yeah, so when it came to the LEACT Commission, Governor Sununu signed the executive order and said that we had to complete our work within 45 days of when the executive order was signed. And we quickly found out that that was completely impossible, especially with how we were running things in the beginning. And so the 45 days was up, and we only just covered training. And with all the people that came to testify, whether it be members of the public and members of the professional experience and things like that, expertise, we just ran out of time, and we were only just done that section, and we still had community relations and police misconduct to cover. And so Governor Sununu could have very well said, nope, I gave you 45 days, that's it. Probably would have been a bad look, but he could have done that. And so we asked for an extension of, I think, 60 days, and we were given an extension of 30 days. And so the last meeting of the commission will be on August 31st, just in time for me to start my semester. And so, the way we organize things now, it should be done, but we were able to receive the extension, so.
great, thank you, Ronelle. Lydia Yen asks, what types of events should groups like Change for Concord do to help?
Keep doing what you're doing.
Community outreach and
community outreach, continue facilitating discussions with the public about how, find out, so that way you're building a connection with the people who live within the community, facilitate discussions where, police people, the people who are policing are also present, but it would be great if they're not in their uniform, so they can come in as regular people, and continue to have events where the general public is getting comfortable with knowing their elected officials.
All right, and I'm sorry if I'm missing folks who've raised their hands and want to be recognized. Do put something in the chat if you want to read your own question off. Otherwise, I'll just keep feeding them out. Thank you, Martin. The next question from Doris Hampton: how are the schools in Manchester and Concord hearing your descriptions of how you experienced your schooling? So have you had reactions? Have you had a chance to go back and talk to folks, and what has been the reaction?
So a lot of the members of like the school board and things like that have actually gone in contact with us and wanted to have conversations about how they can help and really push forward the change that we want to see in the school system. So I think that's been really great. So there actually were a couple members who came to a youth outreach event that we had, and so they wanted to hear directly from youth who had been through the Manchester School District to hear what they had to say about the types of things that we experienced. And earlier, when all of this began, I believe it was in like earlier June, an article was actually written in the Union Leader, and like I was interviewed for it along with Elijah Kendrick, who's also in Black Lives Matter Manchester, and we talked about a lot of the experiences that we had in the Manchester School District. And they got they actually did an interview with the, what is it called, superintendent as well, and other people who work with the school district, and they said that it's not tolerated and all of these things that they want to do to change it. But one thing that I found interesting was they talked about how they wanted to, for one, diversify the staff in the Manchester School District. One thing that I found interesting about that is they don't even collect data on the races of the teachers. And so a lot of things, there's just a lot of that going on, and a lot of things that I believe is just like lip service at this point, because it's like, if you don't even collect data on those things, how you expect to change it? And so there are definitely some people who have had my back in the school system, and like I'll definitely be looking to work with them in the future. But at the same time, like a lot of them have been listening, but a lot of them you have to wonder whether or not they're actually going to be putting forth any change. So
Thank you. That's gonna resonate with me for a while.
I will add to that. That's fine.
Go ahead, Martin. Yeah.
Yeah, just to touch on the school. I've gotten a chance to also hear from a friend of mine who's talking about Manchester in the process of reopening them, discussing that. I definitely would say that within Concord, it's a lot of it's been a lot of like lip service, and people haven't been taking action and taking initiative to actually do what they say that they're going to do, or I guess when the hype was there and they were pressured to say something, they spoke and then went quiet. I think now it's like a lot of it's like you're seeing people's just like it's self-interest really. A lot of the leaders are really doing it because maybe they have a kid that's going to the school, and it's like, what will benefit me? And they're not thinking about everybody as a whole. What will benefit the whole school, and what will be the best for every student, like, and in whatever capacity that looks like. I think that's the challenge right now that a lot of the schools are facing, and particularly within Concord. And I know as well from what the conversation I've heard today in Manchester as well, is that you can't just say, you can't, it's like this, making decisions like these, it's not a blanket. You can't just blanket everything and say, oh, well, we're just not going to have people come into the building. Is who are the people who need it the most, right? Who are the people who are at a disadvantage within society, that we have the resource to make sure that everybody gets the fair treatment, and let's talk equity and do equity, and not just use the word equity just for the sake of saying it because it sounds great.
Thanks. All right, so let's do lightning round. We've got 6 minutes before we have to start the process of signing off, and there's some great questions that I really want to hear your responses to. So I'm going to just go through and try to answer as quickly as we can so we can get through all that we have left the first question is from Zachary Green. Is Black Lives Matter planning to get involved with the state primaries?
That's a good question. I think that we already involved ourselves more than we originally planned. I know, like, you've probably heard of the demands that we sent to the gubernatorial candidates, and we talked about what we wanted them to do as governor. So I think directly, that's maybe as much as we are going to, simply because it's a little iffy right now in regards to like our status as like whether or not like we're going to be a 501c3 for like and for how long. I would encourage you to look at our personal social media accounts. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. So yeah, but that's where you'll find a lot of information on how we feel about things, and like if that's important to you and like that's something that you'd like to take into account, then I would encourage you to do that.
Great. Martin, did you want to respond to that, or should we move on?
Yeah, you can go.
All right, cool. The next question is from Connie Sheffy. She says, I'm concerned about the association of looting with Black Lives Matter in terms of being in favor of it, ? And so I think she's looking for kind of a discussion of how you deal with that reality that there are people out there that are tactically at odds maybe with the mainstream of what you think is going to get things done. Can you respond to that at all?
So how I see it is, like I talked about earlier, how I'm trying to answer this as quickly as possible, how I study political science. And in this past semester, I learned a lot about Thomas Paine and his views on violent resistance. And he actually, how he sees things is he believes that things should have been solved before things even got to this point. And that's how I see things as well. I neither condemn nor condone violence, but I also believe that we do not have the right to tell people how to react to their oppression. And that might not be the way that I go about things, but I also don't know, like what people have seen or experienced. And so when it comes to that, I know a lot of people are against it and a lot of people have feelings about it, but I think we need to focus on the message and why people are doing that instead of focusing on how they choose to go about their oppression.
Martin?
I just think that, like Ronelle said, like the focus is like, it's on that alone, when in the reality it's like people hurting, and they're screaming and yelling and have tried so many different tactics and different ways to get your attention, but it's like you won't budge until your plant is on fire. Like, why is that? You know, if America would have responded when Kaepernick took a knee, you wouldn't have worried about a store being burnt down in order to get your attention now. And I think just like as far as like what people value more, it just comes to show again, it's like you value property more than human beings. And that's sad.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Becky Field. Becky, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems to me, and I'm frustrated like so many people, that we've been in this place before, so many times before, dealing with the aftermath of incredible racial injustice and violence against people of color. So I guess I have a two-part question. One, do you think we've made any really substantial changes in New Hampshire since the last time we've been dealing with this? And number two, do you think this situation this time is different?
To the New Hampshire question, at this point, no. I think substantial change is yet to come. And I know that's a disappointing answer to hear, but I think that we just have to keep fighting for it. Here in New Hampshire, we embrace challenges, and we're like one of the most progressive states when it comes to things like this. And so I think we just need to keep pushing. And so we just need to keep the fight going. To the second question, I'm going to be honest, I forgot what the second question was already. Is this time different?
Oh,
okay. Yeah. In my opinion, I think things are a little bit different simply because I believe here in New Hampshire, there hasn't been a conversation like this before. This conversation has been going on for I think 3 months now. And obviously I'm only 21 years old. So, and I've only lived in New Hampshire since I was in 5th grade. So beyond that, I don't know too much, but I think that this time people felt a little different simply because it took 8 minutes and 46 seconds of that video of George Floyd being suffocated to wake up the nation. But this was just a reminder for us of 400 years of oppression, and that's what we're battling. Like, all this is a battle cry against 400 years of oppression. I think a lot more people are waking up to that.
Martin, did you want to add to that? I think we're about out of time. We've got some really great questions that I hate to miss here, but
I will answer all of these on my personal social media if you guys want to message me, like, I promise.
And Martin, did you want to add anything in response to Becky's question?
Yeah, I think since people are kind of bored, they have no other choice but to wrestle with what's in front of them. And there's really if there was sports happening, and people were able to go out to watch baseball games and football games, and go to the NBA, and it was business as usual, it would have been like Trayvon Martin. it would have been like just like a fleeting story for a couple of days, and then everybody's gone. But now it's like you really can't. You're bored and you have nothing else. There's nothing good on Netflix right now. I mean, so.
Well, thank you, Martin. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. The next two questions in particular, they're really great questions that I think we could spend an hour responding to each of them. But we are out of time. I do want to encourage people to come back on the 30th, which is on a Sunday, when through the Building a Culture of Peace Forum, we'll be hosting Michael McPherson. Michael was twice the executive director of Veterans for Peace, and he took a lot of heat for when Mike Brown was killed, really focusing an organization that had typically and historically been focused entirely on foreign policy. And he directed most of the organization towards working on Black Lives Matter. He was a co-founder of the Hands Up, Don't Shoot coalition out in St. Louis, and he's continued to do racial justice work and make the connections between global peace movement and peace building, and the reality that we need to extend that ideology into within our own borders, and consider the reality that the state is involved in violent death in an unaccountable way, not only overseas where we bomb people, but right here at home, and that peace and Black Lives Matter are really woven together in that way. And so I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion with Michael. The next day will be our next community discussion through this. So again, Monday night at 7, this will be August 31st. First, we'll be talking about the Just Schools movement. I hope everybody will join us for that. Thank you for being with us tonight, everyone. And like Ronelle said, she'll respond to some questions on her Facebook. So feel free to reach out there. Yeah, round of applause. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
All right. Good night, folks.